The holiday season is upon us, and as you can see, I've completely decked out my studio with some Christmas decorations, and the holiday spirit has hit me so hard I'd even put a Santa hat on my head. However, studio is all nice and ready for Christmas as we prepare through the Thanksgiving holiday and on our way to Christmas. So, for the next 2 months, you might see some more decorations come into play, but as for now, this is what the studio looks like for the upcoming videos. And to start this holiday season off, I was trying to think of a really fun way to bring a video to you guys, and I came up with nothing. But one of the biggest topics of discussion in the movie industry today is the fact that Joker 2 is just a big bomb in the box office, as well as being a movie in general. And I've seen it twice. And on the second rewatch, I decided to come up with 10 reasons as to why Joker Folie bombed exponentially hard. So let's go through 10 reasons why Joker 2 failed miserably. If you like these kind of videos, make sure to like and subscribe for more, but let's get into the video. Number 1, it's not actually a musical. Despite how much Todd Phillips wants us to think that this movie is a musical, it's not a musical. Writing a movie with characters and just having a few scenes with them singing songs doesn't scream musical to me. When I think of musical, I think of like La La Land, and how the music actually correlates with the story and characters and how it pushes the narrative along. But as far as Joker 2, the only thing that the music really is there for is to show that everything is happening in Arthur's mind, and he is clearly a psychopath. And I feel like that's all the thought that went into making this a musical, is that they really wanted most of the movie to be all in Arthur's head. And, you know, I think to a certain extent that is a pretty interesting way of going about things. But when you market this as a musical, which already is a pretty strange thing to do for a sequel to a movie that was the complete opposite, it leaves us wanting a lot with that idea. And what they do with the musical numbers is basically just throw them in there. If you take the musical numbers out of this movie, it's just a very poor court drama. And weirdly enough, Quentin Tarantino actually loves Joker 2. So I don't know what that says about the movie or what that says about him. Because even though on my rewatch, I tended to enjoy it a little bit more than I did on my first watch, it is still a very poor movie. And just in total, it's not actually a musical, or at least not in the sense that they wanted us to believe that it was a musical. Problem number 2 is that bigger budget doesn't mean better story. So for those who weren't aware, Joker 2 had nearly 4 times the amount of budget that the first film had. The first movie had a $55 million budget, and Joker 2 has a near $200 million budget. All of that was pretty much for all of the explosions and the sights and the musical numbers, the sets, and it really all just went to shit, and nothing actually went into the story of this. Now, I understand, again, that Todd Phillips really wanted to create this Joker 2 to really tell us that Arthur isn't in fact the Joker that we all know and love, and it's someone else. Arthur was just the creation, I guess, of the real Joker, giving them the inspiration to become the actual Joker, which to me was a very, very, very bad and horrible way of ending Joker 2. I think they could have gone in an interesting and different route of killing Arthur off the end of it, but the way they did it was very sloppy, and weirdly enough had a connection to The Dark Knight, which I did not like that at all, because the fact that Joker, the first movie, Todd Phillips wanted to actually, you know, the scene where Joker wipes the blood on his to make a smile on his face, that was actually originally supposed to be a scene where Arthur carves a smile into his mouth, but Christopher Nolan kind of had a interesting way of going about making sure that wasn't going to happen, and kind of a self-loathing way, but basically that his Joker is the only Joker that could do that, which in retrospective, that's a pretty fair thing to want from, you know, a movie that you created yourself and your own original idea, because Joker in the comics never carved a smile into his mouth. It was always like a birth defect or just a painted on smile. It was never a carving in the face. And Todd Phillips really wanted to piggyback off that and do it in his own way. And he ended up doing it his own way in the end of Joker 2. And it was very poor and just very like a smack to the forehead for the audience. And yes, that still all has to do with the big budget, because no, a big budget does not mean a better movie. Joker made over $1 billion. I think it was like $1.17 billion on a $55 million budget. That is an insane payday. That's amazing. And the fact that Joker 2, and we're going to get this a little bit later when it comes to the box office numbers, this had a $200 million budget, and it didn't even get close to breaking even. That brings us to number 3. It was an absolute box office failure. So Joker 2 is expected to make between $210 to $215 million budget in its final days in the movie theater. It's actually already on streaming. You can rent it or buy it now on Apple TV Plus, I believe. But yeah, Joker, like I said in the previous issue, is that it had a $200 million budget. And the fact that it only made $210 to $215 million budget is horrible. And for those who don't know how box office number works, basically to break even, you need to make double the amount of the budget. So if the movie was $200 million to make, you need to make $400 million to break even. And even that's not that amazing. You really want to make 3 times the amount of the budget of the movie. And this only made the amount that the movie cost to make, which is absolutely horrible. That's going to lose them a ton and a ton of money. But Todd Phillips had a few things to say about this as far as how to get people back in the theaters to go see movies so that box office failures don't happen like it happened to Joker 2. And his reasoning is that we don't need trailers. Stop showing trailers at the beginning of the movies because it takes up way too much time. And honestly, it kind of does. I mean, when I go see a movie that's an hour and a half, you tend to have like 15 to 20 minutes of trailers at the beginning, which kind of messes with time if you're wanting to get out of the theater at a specific time and especially when it comes to me, since I'm always at the theaters watching movies, I try to get out of the movie theater at a certain amount of time so I can get home and do my job. But anyways, that's besides the point. That's really not a valid reason to kind of blame the theater experience for the box office failure, because really, ever since this movie was announced, people hated the idea that this movie was going to be a musical. And I was one of the select few that I was actually pretty optimistic about the idea, because I thought that in Joker, the first movie, it kind of set up that idea that Arthur has music inside of him. And I had ideas, I had, visions as to what this movie was going to do, but obviously the Joker 2 kind of just didn't do anything creative as far as some nice set pieces. But yeah, Todd Phillips is kind of coming up with different and bad reasons as to why this movie's failing in the box office. But to make a movie a musical that shouldn't have been a musical, and based around people's perspective as to not liking musicals to begin with, that is a pretty crazy thing to pull on a sequel. $200 million, and they ended up doing it in the musical. That was the biggest mistake to begin with. It is a huge bummer that it only made $215 million, but that's kind of what you're going to get when you make a sequel that you really didn't need to make in the first place. That'll bring us to a different issue that I have about it. Next, I have the singing of the movie. Lady Gaga, the only legitimate musician in the movie that's cast as Harley Quinn, barely got any time to sing. Why is that? I understand that Arthur is the main character and we're supposed to be listening to him sing. And although Joaquin Phoenix did an okay job with his vocals, I think it added a little bit to Arthur, because obviously Arthur is not, this perfect singer. But it would have been interesting to also see Joaquin Phoenix have this very, very great voice that sort of triumphs the idea that Arthur in his head sees himself as this like perfect being or this very powerful being. So it would make sense that he had great vocal range, but he didn't have the most amazing vocal range. But Lady Gaga does, and she only gets a few moments to sing. And in some moments that she actually does get to sing, it's very quiet, very somber. She doesn't really have a moment to really show her true power in her vocals. So that was a pretty big issue that I had when watching the movie, because, you know, it's Lady Gaga has a very amazing voice, and it would have been really nice to even see, you know, both Arthur and Harley Quinn have more moments together singing together, but they only had like 1 or 2, and it was just kind of a letdown, and really was just another reason that it just kind of pulled me away from the whole idea of it being a musical. But that was just another little problem that I had with the overall singing portion of the movie. But what I will say that kind of is a better thing about the singing is that the Joker is me scene, even though Joaquin Phoenix doesn't have the most amazing vocal range like I was saying, that scene is one of the best scenes from the movie. I think it was shot beautifully. The movie's cinematography is amazing, so it was shot beautifully. The set's amazing, the lighting is amazing, the performances are amazing, and the singing is subpar, but it was a really fun and well put together scene. So that is a plus for the singing portion of the movie. But let's get on to my next issue. Coming in at 5, I have character choices, and that just means basically everything that happens throughout the movie with the characters. Now, we have these security guards that are pretty friendly, but also kind of mean towards Arthur. And, you know, throughout the movie, Arthur is trying to, maybe not trying to, but he is more friendly with these guards because he's known them for the time that he's been in Arkham Asylum. And the guards are sort of like, you know, kind of his buds, but not really. They tell him jokes, and, you know, what's the joke of the day? They give him cigarettes, and, you know, like blah, 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 whatever. But later in the movie, Arthur kind of picks on them picks on them on live TV when he's at court, and then when he gets back, these security guards decide to assault him, and that's the easiest way I can put it, without getting too deep into that. But it was a very odd choice, and I didn't think it needed to be in there at all. I think that when it comes to the characters of the movie, it should have really been focused on Arthur and Harley. And I think that it really was focused a little bit too much on side characters, and it just really pulled me out in that moment. There were a few other moments where it feels like Todd Phillips really wanted to remind the audience that Arthur is a weirdo, and there's scenes where, you know, he's kissing people, and, you know, he kisses that inmate because the guards were talking about his sexuality in just a very insulting way, and he ends up kissing this inmate that's never been kissed before, which is fine. I think that was a little bit more of an understanding moment in the movie, because Arthur sort of just accepts, you know, what people see of him and what people ask of him. But then there's moments where Arthur is kissing like his lawyer, and it's just like, all right, I don't understand this. You're gonna have to try and do better when it comes to letting us know that Arthur is in this moment of thinking to himself that he is the moment. He is not doing anything wrong. No one can hurt him. But having moments like that isn't really gonna cement that idea into us the way that they want us to, or the way that they want it to. My next issue has to be the musical numbers, which I've already touched on in this video when it comes to the idea that this movie, if you just took out all the musical numbers, that it would just be a bad court drama. And I stand by that. But when we go deeper into the musical numbers of the movie, it's a bummer, because I understand that they were really trying to create these beautiful set pieces. They were trying to orchestrate these musical numbers, which, you know, I can respect the work that went into them. But like I said, they do nothing for the plot. And I was really hoping that they were going to. But there's moments where we go from a scene and then it cuts to this musical number, and then the musical number's over with, and then it cuts right back to the scene. And it just doesn't make sense to me. And it's a real bummer, because I can tell that there is something here with Joker 2 as far as it being a musical. I can tell that they were really trying to connect that musical aspect to the story. but there is really no connection. This is the musical portion aspect of the movie, and this is the court drama aspect of the movie. They are not connecting at all. Now, as far as the technical aspects to the musical numbers, I think they're blocked very well. I think they have really nice set pieces, but that's basically it. I can tell that whoever worked on it, Todd Phillips, clearly the director, but whoever orchestrated the stuff, I can tell they were really trying to make something artsy and creative. And although that it might look cool, it really just wasn't. That brings me to my next issue, in which this movie is wanting to be cool and artsy rather than interesting and captivating. Joker 2019 was a very interesting movie and very captivating, and even had those little undertones of artsy, and it was a really nice movie. Obviously, it has a lot of connections to Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver. I mean, it's honestly super similar, but Martin Scorsese was actually supposed to be a producer or executive producer on Joker 2019, but I'm pretty sure he couldn't because of contract issues, and he was working on The Irishman, so he couldn't be a producer on Joker. Imagine if he was. Holy crap. But Joker 2019 was very interesting and captivating, like I said. Todd Phillips, obviously had inspiration from Taxi Driver and was wanting to connect that with a DC character, but wanting to have it be a character study on just someone, not necessarily any of the Jokers that we've seen in the comic books, because Arthur Fleck isn't a comic book character. This is all a very original story. It's a part of the dark DC universe. But Joker 2 kind of just goes off and does its own thing and really separates itself from Joker 2019, which not necessarily a bad thing, but the movies shouldn't feel this different. Joker 2019 feels authentic. And it feels real. It feels like we're in this gritty Gotham. It feels like we are with these characters. We understand Arthur's perspective as to why he's doing these things to these horrible people. And he doesn't have that, desire to kill people, but he does because he hates being picked on. And I think that's something that people can connect to a certain extent, obviously, but we can feel for Arthur because we have those, we have empathy, or sympathy. But Joker 2 just feels like Arthur is a completely different character. It would have been so much more interesting if somehow Joker 2 kept the same idea of Joker 2019 by making us, feel for Arthur, making us know that Arthur's bad. Clearly, he is, unhinged, but there is that level to us that kind of understand where he's coming from as far as being treated horribly by society. But what would have been more interesting in Joker 2 is if they did that, but then slowly built up that idea to us that actually, you know what? Arthur's kind of lost his way, just like how Gotham was losing its way in Joker 2019. And it would have been so much more hard-hitting, and it would have even been more emotional to the audience, because with Joker 2019, we were kind of left on that itty cliffhanger. Not so much a cliffhanger where we were like, oh my gosh, where is the sequel? Because it ended like this. No, it ended very ambiguous as to what the whole idea of the movie was. Was it in his head? Is this real? Was he in Arkham Asylum the whole time? And it's just like, that was great. That was amazing. But Joker 2 is just like a slap in the face. And we're going to get more into those issues because I'm going to be talking about the ending a little bit, but that's just another issue that I had. So yeah, this kind of piggybacks off of everything that I've talked about in this video thus far, but when we actually talk about the idea of this sequel being a sequel, we have to really talk about, was it really necessary? And I don't think so. When I left the theater twice now watching Joker 2, I immediately questioned or told myself, this movie doesn't exist to me. I'm not going to let it affect how I feel about Joker 2019. I'm still going to let Joker 2019 have the ending that it had. I'm going to pretend that Joker 2 doesn't exist, and Joker 2019 is its own movie with its own ending that obviously doesn't have a sequel, because why would we give that movie a sequel? I know, money. And what sucks is that they played me like a fool. I was optimistic for this musical idea. I really, really like the musical idea. I try to be as optimistic as possible. I mean, you guys know. I mean, maybe not the people on YouTube right now, but people on like my TikTok, they all know that I like being optimistic about movies. I try not to be super negative about some. You know, sometimes I can tell when a movie's going to be hot garbage and I don't end up seeing that movie because I don't, you know, I'm not going to talk about it or I'm not going to like it. But when it comes to a movie that I'm really excited about, I want to be as optimistic as possible because I like the director's vision. I love the actors, but this movie really felt like it was just there for the money. And that makes me question as to how much thought actually went into this movie. And every single time an issue gets popped up about why this movie's failing, it feels like the filmmakers are just coming up with just these horrible excuses as to why the movie's either failing in the theater or why people didn't like it. And sometimes they just probably just look at themselves and be like, you know what, honestly, this might be something that I like personally. Like this might be something that, you know, I made because I personally like this ending. I personally like the character choices. I personally like how the story moves forward. But you know what? Maybe it's not for everyone. You know, there's going to be a select few people that actually like this movie, but I feel like there's going to be a majority of people that don't like this movie. So that's probably one of the bigger issues that I have with this, is that the movie is completely unnecessary. Issue number 9, that very, 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 very anticlimactic ending. The ending of this movie has been discussed since it came out back in October, and now it's even streaming, so it really didn't get that long in theaters because it was failing horribly, but the anticlimactic ending is probably the biggest issue with this movie. Maybe not the biggest issue, but definitely the thing that people hated most. So, as stated in this video, the ending is basically Arthur gets called because someone is there to visit him, supposedly. Maybe there isn't, maybe there was. And then he gets pulled into this alley by the security guard who weirdly is walking way, 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 way ahead of him, which they don't usually do. They usually walk side by side so that the person doesn't get out of their reach. So that's another reason as to think that this was all set up. And then this other inmate comes in, which throughout the movie, this inmate was teased, I guess, I don't know if that's the correct word, but there were scenes where the camera is just weirdly on this person. He's smiling very weirdly. He's sort of off in the corner. And then in this final scene, he comes up to Arthur, all excited, and he wants to tell him this joke. And he tells him a joke about this guy in a bar and blah, 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 blah. It's a callback to the ending of Joker where Arthur says you get what you effing deserve to Murray Franklin and kills him. And then this inmate says a very similar joke with this exact same punchline and then shivs him. And Arthur dies on the ground. And then the killer, the inmate, sits down in the back. And as the camera pans in on Arthur on the ground, he carves a smile into his mouth in the background. And that's where it ends. Arthur's dead, and that was the real Joker. What the fuck? A lot of people's problem with this scene is that it's sort of disrespect to the Dark Knight because, you know, it sort of makes that connection to Heath Ledger's Joker as far as who Heath Ledger's Joker was before his Joker was in The Dark Knight. But at the same time, it really doesn't make sense because if with the timelines lined up, Heath Ledger's Joker either wouldn't even have been born yet or would have been very, very, very young at this time in Arthur's life. So it wouldn't even make sense for him to be that old in Arkham. So that's just a little bit confusing. So obviously this is probably not Heath Ledger's Joker, but it's a really weird connection that just doesn't make any sense. So just a very, very interesting choice as to how they were going to show who the real Joker was. I think they could have done a plethora of different ways of showing that, but they went in that route, which is a tad bit disrespectful, but we can move past from that. One of my biggest issues about this character choice with this inmate is that he has no reason to kill Arthur, or at least no reasons that we see. Why was this inmate so mad at Arthur? And you know, maybe it's because the inmate is just a psycho and just wanted to kill Arthur because maybe he thought Arthur was getting all the attention, but he wanted the attention, so maybe that's why he killed Arthur. But the way he said the joke to Arthur, it was there to make the audience think that he has some sort of vendetta against Arthur, and that's why he killed him. That doesn't make any sense to me. Why would they do that? And I'm sorry, putting scenes in throughout the movie, just placed like, you know, wherever, with this inmate in the background, like doing this and like smiling like in the corner, that doesn't do anything for the character. That doesn't give us any reason. Like they were thinking that we were gonna go back and rewatch this movie and be like, oh my gosh, they were showing him in the background before he like offed Arthur. Like, no, that's not how we're gonna react to that. Like it really didn't make any sort of sense. It was just there, the movie ended, and Arthur died. That sucks. But that brings me to my 10th and final issue. This movie could have been something great. This is sort of a sum up of everything that I've talked about throughout this video, but really, Joker 2 could have been something phenomenal if they'd have just done things differently, which I know sounds a little bit childish to say that. Could have been better if you did it differently. But what I mean by that is if they'd have honestly had just moved things around in the story, if they'd had changed a few character choices, if they'd had changed a few, you know, dialogue choices, have changed a few scenes, this movie could have been something really cool. And honestly, it could have set up a different movie, or it could have ended as if Arthur actually was the real Joker. But it was just a silly movie. It was long. Arthur's character didn't go through any sort of like real changes. He kind of just becomes this asshole. And, you know, as you can watch in Joker 2019, Arthur wasn't an asshole. He, you know, eventually he became kind of self-righteous to the point of saying that people couldn't hurt him anymore because of, you know, the power that he was feeling in that moment. But we could still feel for him in a sense. But Joker 2 is kind of just like, oh yeah, by the way, Arthur's actually a jerk, and this is why he's gonna die at the end of the movie. That's not a good story. In this video, I even explained as to how they could have just gone about giving us more reason to feel for Arthur. This movie could have been about how Arthur is still this very hurt individual, clearly, you know, messed up in the head because of his murders and about what goes through his mind, but they still could have given us a chance to have that sympathy towards him, you know, and then throughout the movie progressively get worse and worse to the point where we just are like, yep, he is just a bad person. And we were the fools for thinking that something good was going to come from Arthur. And it was just a huge letdown. That's probably my biggest issue. But anyways, that will bring us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of it. I think Joker 2 is a huge failure and clearly a box office failure, and those were 10 issues that I had with the movie, but I'm curious to know what your biggest issue was with Joker 2, or if you absolutely love this movie, tell me why you loved it and why you think people are hating on it. Make sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this, but that'll bring us to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. And remember, your movie moment is right around the corner. See you in the next video.